Good morning. Thank you so much for coming to our Linger over breakfast, finally in person with guests. I think the rest and everyone on Zoom. So we are being tech savvy and having people in person with masks when we're in person. So this is good. Thank you so much. This is a great example of together we are more. We are finally together and it feels so wonderful to have everybody here in person. Before I begin, I want to do a special note for our sisters in Kansas City. This is our 155th year of the sisters being in Kansas City, marking right now. So thank you to all the sisters. In honor of this, we asked one of our sisters, who is a very quiet artist, if you go on our Facebook page, you'll see her mandalas. They're so wonderful. And she is not an artist by training. We asked her if she could do a mandala for us. So you will be seeing this throughout. And she did a poem for us. So Sister Laverne Offmuth is here. And she did all of this. And you'll be seeing this throughout the year. It's amazing. It's amazing how she did this. So thank you so much. I also want to thank our founding sponsors, St. Teresa's Academy, and today's host, Avila University. In addition, I want to thank our newest sponsors, the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation and the Buchanan Initiative for Peace and Nonviolence at Avila University. They stepped up this year and gladly helped us out with their generosity. And because of that, we were able to do more Zoom that we did in April and May, and now in October, and have it here, and it's complimentary because of them. So thank them so much for helping join us together. Today, we are exploring care for creation in action with Jerusalem Farm, which was co-founded. Part of the founding sponsors are our sisters in Avila University. Jerusalem Farm, it's a Catholic intentional community located in Kansas City, and it's built on the 4 cornerstones of prayer, community, service, and simplicity, and they strive to transform the lives around them through service retreat, experiences, sustainable living, and home repair. It is a wonderful organization. You're gonna find more about it. For those of you here in person, a few housekeeping items. If you do, when you have questions, we can raise your hand or you can write them down. We've got that at the tables. For people on Zoom, when we get to the question and answer session, just write it, put it in the chat session and we'll get with that. Additionally, for our people here in person, the bathrooms are over to the left, that way. Now I'd like to introduce Dave Armstrong. He is head of Avila University's Mission and Ministry. Also, he was instrumental, the person to bring Jerusalem Farm to Kansas City, and he does so many wonderful things. I'll let Dave take it from here. Thank you.
So she says, thanks, Barb. She says, take it from here. I'm going to say a little introduction for them, but first we're going to have Sister Helen come say a prayer. But I wanted to welcome you to Avila University. For those out there in the video world, welcome to South Kansas City, Missouri on this Saturday morning. It's great to have you all here. Thank you. For those in the room, thank you for getting up and being here. For those on you in Zoom, thank you for sticking with us this morning. So with that, I call forward Sister Helen Flemington, a wonderful, wonderful person here who I first met when she was pastoral associate at St. Teresa, the Little Flower in Kansas City. And today she comes to us nicely retired. Sister Helen.
I was trying to get a prayer that would overall what we're doing today. So let us pray. In this time and in any time, our deepest hope, our most tender prayer is that we learn to listen. May we listen to one another in openness and mercy. May we listen to plants and animals in wonder and respect. May we listen to our own hearts in love and forgiveness. May we listen to God in quietness and awe. And in this listening, which is boundless in its beauty, may we find wisdom to cooperate with a healing spirit, a divine spirit who beckons us into peace and community and creativity. We do not ask for a perfect world, but we do ask for a better world. We ask for deep listening. Amen.
Thank you so much, Sister Helen. First, I want to apologize that my introductions may be a couple of minutes in length, but I'll hope you see why at the end of this introduction, why it's best done while telling the story of why these two wonderful young people are here today in Kansas City. So I appreciate you indulging me in this. In August of 2009, I was at Nazareth Farm in West Virginia, having just arrived with my kids for what would be another family week with great friends that we have met over the years of retreating at the Appalachian Farm and going out together into the mountains to learn great things while working to improve homes. This particular week had a surprise of its own. As we had arrived on a Sunday evening, we're sitting on the front lawn when I noticed a couple of young people themselves arriving for what would be a 2-year immersion into the region. Yes. Oh, I meant to do that, so thank you. And in this, let's see, where was I? They were distinctive, these two young people who were coming towards me on the lawn. They were distinctive in that they were descalced, that is barefoot, just like our dear Saint Teresa. And they each carried long hair, beautifully landscaped with dreadlocks. Their introduction was gentle and joyful, and immediately I could feel that they were special. Little did I know how special they would become to me and my family, and to so many others, many of you here in this room. After that initial meeting at Nazareth, I was back at Nazareth Farm in 2011, this time with my wife, Kelly, for the same family week and adventure at the farm. At that time, Jessie was 9 months pregnant with their first child. I knew that it would be time for them to move forward to another ministry. And so during the week, I asked Jordan what their plans are. He told me that they hope to move to Detroit to start a Catholic worker house. Jessie grew up in Gaylord in northern Michigan. Or he said, maybe we'll go back to California and start a farm around Sacramento, where Jordan grew up. Without me having anything in mind, I asked, if something pops up in Kansas City, would you be interested? Jordan kind of shrugged. Oh, that's my face. Jordan kind of, there we go. Jordan shrugged, wondered what that meant, and said, you can always call us. On Friday of that family week in West Virginia, Jordan was quickly summoned from the room where our families had gathered for prayer. As he rushed out, we all looked at each other. We knew that the baby would arrive soon. And it did. It took a couple more days, but it did. After I returned home a couple of weeks after I was here, about now in the middle of August, the chancellor of the diocese, Jude Huntz, contacted me about a building off Independence Avenue that would be great for a new nonprofit, and wondered if I had any ideas. Being true to my CSJ charism, I immediately thought that it would be a great place for a St. Joseph worker program. That idea, however, soon failed, or didn't fail, it soon faded. I had not forgotten about my conversation with Jordan, but when I imagined a new venture, I just didn't think the middle of a city would be a great place for a farm. So hesitantly, I met with Jude and Sister Rose McClarney, who's here. Where are you, Sister Rose? Sister Rose. Remember meeting in that office? I'll never forget it. And I asked them, what about this idea of an urban farm on the gospel cornerstones of community, service, simplicity, and prayer? And they both encouraged me. And I was strengthened by that, knowing that I would have someone else to blame if this fell apart. I've always been grateful, Rose, for you and Jude to support this effort. I contacted Jesse and Jordan. I asked them if they would consider the idea of coming to Kansas City, and in biblical fashion of the first beckoning of the Holy Spirit, they said no. Before I hung up the phone, I said one more thing. I said, sleep on it and let me know if you change your mind. At the time, I hadn't really thought of the power of the term sleep on it for an associate of the sisters dedicated to St. Joseph. In this case, St. Joseph the Dreamer. Well, St. Joseph, along with the Holy Spirit, must have worked in their sleep, because the next day, Jesse gave me a call and said they slept on it, and that they would come and they would take a look here in Kansas City. That was 10 years ago this week, October 28th, 2011. With Jordan next to her, 3-month-old now, Nathaniel wrapped in her chest. As we were walking through the building, Jessie looked at me and she said, "We're coming to Kansas City." I was like, oh my gosh, what now? So now here we are, the 10th year of operation, and with the inspiration of the Holy Spirit and the intercession of St. Joseph, for whom this year and the church is dedicated, they, along with their community, have done incredible and wonderful things here in Kansas City, and have inspired thousands of volunteers to live differently in our world. That is, to live the gospel message in these cornerstones. In this way, now with 3 children, they have transformed the lives of hundreds of people with their home repair program and with their presence. Through the years, we have laughed together at many wonderful, surprising things that have happened. It could only be the work of the Holy Spirit. Not least of them is when the main revenue source of volunteers was lost to COVID. The Block Foundation saw the potential of Jesse and Jordan and the farm community, and they presented the farm with a $300,000 grant. The Sisters of St. Joseph have been instrumental in the growth of Jerusalem Farm as well. And with their kindness, it's helped the farm to purchase not only the original property, but now 2 other buildings, including building a brand new community house, which was finished in January of 2019. We're thankful to this day for Sister Jean Jansen, who continues to serve on our board. Where are you, Jean? You're out there somewhere. There she is, right there. Hi, Jean. Thank you so much. There's so much more I could tell you, but it would be better for you to learn it for yourself. Be a volunteer. Come and enjoy the exquisite cuisine of a community night, or join us all on May the 1st, 2022, on the feast of St. Joseph the Worker, when we celebrate our 10th anniversary. So praise be. St. Francis says in the famous canticle, that is Laudato Si, in the title of his encyclical. These are the words of Pope Francis. These are the words he chose to challenge us into a new way of living, not on the earth, but with the earth. So what 2 better people than Jesse and Jordan Shealy? 2 people who live this encyclical in each moment, and who dedicate their lives to search for even better ways to love and care for the earth, and to help others to do so. The 2 met in 2008 when both were working in Vermont in the National Civilian Community Corps, doing what else? Planting trees. They continued their work together later that year in Mississippi, and it wasn't too long after that when they came strolling barefoot on that grass in West Virginia. Praise be. I know what we learned today will be challenging, and maybe you won't know what to do with it or where to take it, and that's perfectly fine. I would invite you to take it with you and sleep on it. Please welcome Jesse and Jordan.
Great. Well, thanks, Dave. Thank you to the sisters, and thanks so much to Avila for having us here for your event, your first in-person event. And first, I'll just do a quick introduction of Jerusalem Farm. I think many of you have been to Jerusalem Farm, at least the faces I see here. And okay. I wanted to make sure I was on the right place. Sorry, why am I nervous? Excited to be here. So first, Dave spoke a bit on the history of Jerusalem Farm in that first meeting with Sister Rose and Jude. And I think that really shows our first cornerstones, our first folks that were really there for us, and that is the sisters, the diocese, and Avila University. Avila started as our fiscal sponsor, and I always say Jerusalem Farm wouldn't have been possible had it not been for the support of Dave and Ron and the rest of Avila University, as well as the Sisters of St. Joseph. Currently, our programs that we are running, I'm actually going to go to the next slide. There we go. Great. Is my volume okay for everyone? I'm trying to not speak too loud to get rid of the reverberation. Am I okay? Okay, thanks. So Barb read our mission at the beginning. This is our mission statement, and it's really the best way to explain what we do. Our current programs include those service retreats. So we host retreats for high school and college students coming for a week-long immersion into our cornerstones, which are prayer, community, service, and simplicity. And then we also have our home repair program, which serves the historic Northeast neighborhoods, families and individuals. And in the past couple of years, we've also started working with code violations, which is something that we didn't work with in West Virginia. Everyone just kind of built whatever they wanted out there. And so here it was a new thing for us to deal with people who were being penalized for having a home in disrepair. That was a whole different idea to us, and the justice issues that the current system causes for people. And last but not least, sustainable living. And in the sense we've started at the farm, we started a curbside compost program. And so that is once a week when people put out their trash and recycling, they can also put out a 5-gallon bucket, and we bike around the neighborhood and pick up the buckets and bring our neighbors' compost back to our house and compost it on our property, and then use that on in our garden and in our orchard. Obviously the garden and the orchard being a part of our sustainable living. We also help with Pendleton Heights Community Garden, and what else? Oh, and for the students, when we host those retreats, we're inviting them into our cornerstone of simplicity, which is quite shocking to some high schoolers from the suburbs to be told that they're only going to have 2 showers during the week, and maybe one of them should be a bucket shower. So 5 gallons of water that they pour over their head, and putting their phones away for the week, general just resource sharing, and introducing resource fasts. So one night a week, we turn off all the lights and don't use running water, just so people can have that experience, because many people have never had the experience of not having running water, on tap at any time. And other things that have come to us in the past couple years are invasive species removal. So unfortunately, the parks in the Northeast are not the gem that they used to be when they were put in. And so we've been working a lot with the city on invasive species removal along Cliff Drive and in Kessler Park. So I just wanted to highlight our cornerstone. So we were invited here today to talk about specifically Care for Creation and our action item, I guess, on that. But I think we like to say, like, our entire community and all that we do is rooted in these cornerstones and in Catholic social teaching. And I just wanted to point out, as Jordan likes to say, the integral ecology of these with Care for Creation. So community, living together and sharing resources, which we'll talk about, we'll kind of dive into these a little bit deeper. Simplicity is a little bit obvious, but living simple enough so everyone can enjoy the earth's resources. Service. So our service includes, mostly people highlight our home repair program, and we try and introduce homeowners to the more sustainable option, and sometimes subsidizing that for people. So if someone wants to put new flooring in their house, obviously going and buying cheap flooring to just throw down and snap together is going to be a cheaper option for people. So we'll charge them the price of that and then put in a more sustainable product like bamboo. So there's different ways that Care for Creation comes into our service program as well. And then also in service, I include our the activism that we are involved in. We are lucky to be part of a community that supports us having personal things that we are passionate about that we can seek and be a part of. Jordan has been very vocal and involved in Peaceworks Kansas City and the anti-nuclear weapons activism that happens here in Kansas City. And Adam, one of our new community members, who's our horticulturist, is very involved in climate action. And he's always the one bringing us the information about the next action that's happening in Kansas City or worldwide. And then last, but certainly not least in our cornerstone is prayer. Just like we started today with a prayer, I think we always need to be recognizing how powerful prayer is and how prayers, especially for our earth and the people on it, are a true way that we can engage with climate action as well. And then going to the other side, Catholic social teaching, Jordan and I were just talking about this on the way down, is that you really, any action that you do that you say like, oh, this is care for creation, will likely be able to fit into any of those other Catholic social teachings, or as I like to call them, best kept secret of the Catholic Church. One that we were talking about is dignity of work. So thinking specifically of farmers. And so when we think about buying our food or something, maybe we want to choose an organic option, and that's a care for creation idea. But also for the farmer who's growing organically, that's a dignity of work that he or she doesn't have to handle chemicals that, I mean, the Roundup case was pretty recent that people are now realizing they're getting cancer just from being a farmer. And that's a dignity of work issue and rights of workers. You want to talk about care for creation?
Okay, so we're here today to talk about care for creation. And I first wanted to just bring this passage to mind and remembering the goodness of creation, and also remembering that we are not separate from creation. We are created beings ourselves. And so we're so interconnected with our habitat, our surrounding, and also that things are good just because they are. So one thing I love about Laudato Si, I think it's one of the first times that Pope Francis I heard from the Catholic Church in a concrete way that like a tree is good, not because it's a resource to be used, but a tree is just good in and of itself as being a part of creation. And so I wanted to call that to mind. And in doing so, also remember, this is from Laudato Si. He says, nature is a constant source of wonder and awe. So you see a picture of our son climbing his little mountain there. I personally enjoy mountains and streams, and we try to go camping and get out into creation, because just like in relationships with one another, if you don't show up to the dinner table, if you don't spend time with one another, you can't build that relationship. And so the same thing is with creation. So getting out in nature, developing that sense of perspective of who we are in the universe, and how how we're just one little small part of this grand thing going on. He says that St. Francis of Assisi reminds us that our common home is like a sister with whom we share our life. And so once again, kind of pointing out that relationship, he points out, St. Francis called creatures my brother or sister, and kind of viewing creation as a sister we share our life with. There's our son on the left, Nathaniel, when we first kind of moved here. And then on the far right is our good friend Sophia. Their family moved here to be in community with us. And that was a family week where we met. So just giving you some fun pictures to look at too. And then he also says, and a beautiful mother who opens her arms to embrace us. So thinking of our earth and the way that it sustains us as human beings. So I just want to take a moment to reflect before we continue on. Maybe in your mind, you can think about a time where you felt the embrace of creation, or where you've been in a situation where it's just this wonder and awe was brought upon you Maybe there's been a moment recently or maybe a little more distant, but let's all take a moment to reflect on that. Sometimes when we have these conversations and we mention climate change, it could be such a politicized kind of word that you don't want to touch because people start shutting you off in different opinions about it. But I think when we reflect on the way that creation moves us, haven't found anyone, or it's been, in all the retreats we host, usually that's a good way that people have those experiences growing up in their childhood or in their adulthood where they found that peace, they found that embrace of the environment around them. But now we're moving on to, some of the why we're here really talking about this is Pope Francis points out the sister now cries out to us because of the harm we've inflicted on her by our irresponsible use and abuse of the goods with which God has endowed her. So I have this picture here of, that's a coal seam. You can see the dark seam along the bottom of those rocks. That's a mountain, Cayford Mountain in West Virginia that we visited as a community, and I took that picture there. You could actually see a little speck in the middle. That's me standing. I didn't take that's me standing down there. Someone took a picture of us. So you can see how grand that is. But these mountains in West Virginia, it was eye-opening to me living there to see how hundreds of mountains have been leveled and removed in this fashion to access that coal seam in a very fast and efficient way of harvesting coal. And of course, I'm sure most of you know, coal is still our primary source of energy of how we're able to turn on these lights and do all the things that we do. And so I think it's important to bring this to mind because, here in Kansas City, we might not see how we are connected to this process. But this process is affecting people that live around these mountains. This particular mountain belonged to a member, Larry Gibson, and his family grew up around this mountain. It's his backyard, essentially. And he was the only neighbor to refuse to sell his property to the coal company. So this is literally right in his backyard that they did all this process. So we are connected to this just by using energy. He also points out the earth, our home, is beginning to look more and more like an immense pile of filth. This top picture of the trash on the ground, that's just a picture Jess and I, we did some hitchhiking when we were younger across the country. And oftentimes we would see people drive by and just throw trash out the window. And then the larger picture is of the Pacific trash pile in the ocean, where all this trash is, ending up finding its way into our water systems. And so, I think we could all, if we did another reflection, we won't right now, but I encourage you today to think about that. We had those moments of awe, but I think we could all think of places where we've seen this trash growing, where we've seen the streams being polluted. Maybe the environment isn't how it was as we were growing up. So these are all signs that something needs to be done. And so that's what we're here for. The last thing I wanted to mention was the poor are often the most affected by the climate or pollution, and so it's a matter of justice. I put this picture in Kansas City of the ozone alert day on the bus. And, one example is oftentimes on these days, they say, don't even go outside, right? Because the air quality is so bad. Then they say you shouldn't spend much time. But so for some people, you can go from your house to your car, to your office, everything's air conditioned and feeling good. But there's a lot of people around the city that spend a long time at bus stops, sitting outside. At least in our neighborhood, they don't even have shelters a lot of times, that you're just standing in the heat. And you're being exposed to the pollutants in the atmosphere. You're being exposed to that heat. And so that's one small example. But also, like in the Northeast, you think about how many of you all live near a plant that produces asphalt? Probably not many, but in the Northeast, it's not uncommon to have industrial businesses that are putting off pollutants right next to a community or right next to, you know, your house. And so we've had homeowners complain to us about headaches from the fumes that they're smelling from these different plants or industrial complexes around there. So those are some examples. Also, you know, with this thought is wealthier nations are able to dispose of their trash in other places. Same thing, if you don't like your environment and you have resources, you can pick up and leave and go somewhere else. Folks that don't have those resources have to live in the area that they're in, regardless of what's happening to the environment. And so wanted to point that out. But all is not lost. And I didn't even go into all the doom and gloom reports that you probably hear in the news. I figure everyone has heard about those. I hope so. But there's all sorts of reports, you know, that of the effects of climate change. We're seeing how it affects immigration and other issues that are pretty complex. We're not getting into that today. But what we do want to point out is that there is hope in all of this. And that's kind of what Jerusalem Farm we're trying to be rooted in, is that hope that we as individuals can come together, can live with one another, and enact real changes in our daily habits and our lifestyles that we have, because that's what we're trying to enact change in. So we're capable of the worst. We're also capable of rising above these challenges. And all it takes is one good person to restore hope. So I find a lot of hope in the youth that come through as well and continue to inspire me. I put a picture of my son there, gardening. So we have these three things, these 3 points we want to leave with you today: being an everyday environmentalist, a conscious consumer, and an ordinary radical. And we're going to go into those.
Power. Did you know it does this too? Oh no, maybe not. Okay. So everyday environmentalist. This is a point that we really try and connect people to at the farm, is living a spirit of abundance. Through capitalism, we're taught this idea that we are not enough, we don't have enough, everyone else has more, everyone else looks better, everyone else is better. But it's all about making that mental shift into living the spirit of abundance. And through living that spirit of abundance, everything else becomes so much easier and becomes a loving action instead of an anti-action. And the spirit of abundance, that can flow through anything in your life. But right now I'm going to talk specifically about these few things. So I am a product of the 80s and early 90s, where we learned, reduce, reuse, recycle. And I think that's still probably what's taught in schools today. But we add a few more into there. And I think the most important is the order as well. So reduce should always be first. And so what does that mean? Reduce what? So, reduce what we use and consume and what we're buying and consuming. And the first and easiest one for me to think about is car usage. And the pandemic, I think in a lot of ways, as terrible as it is, has opened up our eyes to the ideas that we don't have to fly across the world to have a meeting. We can have it on a screen. And yeah, we don't get the human connection, and I'm not for everything being, human connection is also important, but the overuse of resources for just a meeting isn't necessary. And I think we've learned that. And another thing with talking about car usage and things like that is, in Kansas City, we're lucky enough to have a free bus system and bike lanes and things like that. Our city is certainly not the leader in these things, but they're working towards it. And then there's also the idea of sharing. So all that like carpooling and things like that we talk about. But sharing, that idea of carpooling, I think is pretty old and people are aware of that. But then that sharing idea can also feed into other areas. So like at Jerusalem Farm, we have what we call the tool library. And so there's statistics on the average usage of a drill. So the average usage of a drill that is bought is around 2 hours. So that drill will only be used for 2 hours its whole life and then be thrown away. And so at Jerusalem Farm, we have an abundance of tools that we use on home repair projects. And when we first started at Jerusalem Farm, we ran into this idea that so many people in our neighborhood have home repair skills, but don't have access to tools because tools are expensive. And so we started a tool library where people can come and borrow our tools, check out a weed whacker for a few hours, borrow our lawnmower, a drill, whatever it is that we don't all need to own everything. We just need, like my dad's favorite thing, you don't need to own a boat, you need to know someone who owns a boat. I was taught from a very young age how to reduce. But yeah, so those ideas around reducing our consumption of so many things. The second one is reuse. So whenever we have something that came from somewhere, who knows, we look at it and it's like, okay, this is going in the trash. Can we reuse it? Can it be used again? Volunteers are always so surprised that we wash Ziploc bags. Again, my parents, we did this growing up. I think a lot of people do that. I don't think it's weird, but it's shocking to some people, the idea of what can be reused that we don't even think about. The other thing on that is fixing things with reuse. So going back to the drills can have one little teeny tiny plastic piece inside of them that break and then they stop working. And oftentimes the repair cost is just about the same price as buying a new one. But at the farm, we have a commitment to reuse. And so, yeah, we'll pay the $79 to get it repaired as opposed to the $99 of buying a new one. And yeah, it doesn't always make sense, but the cost to the earth is always so much greater. And that's the bigger problem with capitalism and our current system is how we don't see the greater cost. And we don't always have the knowledge of what has, we just see a dollar value. We don't see like the carbon footprint value on everything that we do. Repurpose. So how can it be best used for something else? And the few ways that we do that at the farm is, our chicken coop and our some of our furniture is all made out of pallets and things like that. You find the ways to repurpose things. And my parents were just visiting, and my mom just loves going to Scraps KC. I don't know if y'all are familiar with this, but down in the 31st and something, I'm sometimes bad at geography. There's a place where people take their little scraps from anything, really. It's for teachers mostly, I think, but also for crafters. And my mom's a big crafter as well. And so every time she's like, wants to hit up 2 quilt shops and then go to Scraps Casey because there's places that we can even take the things that we won't personally repurpose, but we know other people will. And the other thing on repurpose is at the farm, we wanted to have Jerusalem Farm swag, just like everyone wants, right? And so we wanted people to have Jerusalem Farm shirts. And so the first thing we did was like, okay, we're going to buy, organic, union made in the US shirts and have them printed at a local print shop, and, figured out the way that we could do that. And then we saw this documentary about clothing and how, all of our thrift store clothes end up in Haiti in these huge piles. And, some of those things are just like so overwhelming to watch, but it's true. Our trash gets sent to a poorer nation, but then they have to take care of it. So we talked about it. And so now at the farm, we go and buy thrift store clothes or have them donated from schools that had a big event with a bunch of t-shirts that they didn't use, and they send them to us. We turn them inside out and have them printed. And so it's kind of like 2 shirts for the price of 1. So not only is it repurposed, it's a 2-for-1 deal at that point. And that sort of is along the lines of upcycle as well. How do I make it into something that can be used for a greater purpose? And then last on the list is recycle. So luckily there's a lot of recycling resources in the city, like donating things, or recyclespot.org has how you can get rid of anything. And that sort of leads into the idea of being a conscious consumer. So living at the farm, in our mission statement, it says we're an intentional community. And so a lot of ways that's explained is like, well, we're intentionally living together. We're not just people that were forced to live together. But being intentional is a thread that can run through our entire lives and make us think about all of the actions and words and thoughts that we do and have. And with that intentionality, remembering nothing is indifferent. Nothing that I do is indifferent. Being here today, how I got here today, what I wore today, none of those things are indifferent because everything is interconnected. And so conscious consumer is along that idea. Every time I make a purchase, I have to go through that list of, well, first, do I even need it? Second, can I borrow it? Can I do the sharing idea instead of having my own? Can I get it secondhand? Can I get it refurbished? Those ideas. And if I do say, okay, yes, this is something I'm going to purchase, then you go through your second list, which is that who, what, where, how, and why when we're purchasing something. So those ideas could be, what is it made from? Where was it made? Who made it? Were they paid properly? Who's selling it? And so those ideas. So I wanted everyone to take a second and think about this. So I think the easiest example for me is food purchases. So think about, you could even write down maybe on your notepad or cards that are on the table. When you are purchasing food, what are some of the first things that you think about when you purchase food? Like what are your values when you purchase food? So we did this activity as a community to help us figure out how we wanted to, because all of the resources at the farm come from generous donors and grants and volunteers. So we want to be maybe even more intentional and mindful about how we use our resources. So we sat down as a community and had this conversation. And the things that came up around food were, well, first, that's when I get on my soapbox and talk about being a vegetarian for 14 years, but does it contain animal products? Because that is, unfortunately, for those of us who maybe like barbecue, is a huge contributor to climate. So yeah, is it non-animal? Is it from a farmer? Are we buying it straight from a farmer? Is it organic or non-GMO? Is it from a local store? Is it local? Is it in season? What kind of packaging is it in? And what is its general carbon footprint? So a lot of nations are pushing for a carbon labeling, just like there's calories. We would also have carbon labeling on our food, which would be amazing, because when we make choices, the more informed we are, the better choices we can make. And so why why does this apple have such a huge, its calories are great, but what its carbon footprint is huge? Well, it's because you're trying to eat an apple in February that was flown here from New Zealand. And so having those thoughts in our mind when we're making choices. So what we did as a community was made a list of what was most important about our food choices, and put that right next to the shopping list. So then when we write something on the shopping list, we can see it and say, oh, do I need whatever, this out of season food, or do I need this thing that I know we can't get locally, or I know we can't get from a farmer, or that's going to be wrapped in 16 layers of plastic when I buy it. Having those ideas right next to your shopping list, so you are reminded to make that informed choice when you go to the store. And so, yeah, putting your values down and then maybe rearranging your values as well, like with that intentionality and nothing is indifferent in mind. The biggest thing we can do as consumers is just consume less. This is one of my favorite quotes from Laudato Si, talking about the New Zealand bishops, when asked what the commandment "thou shalt not kill" means, when 20% of the world's population consumes resources at a rate that robs poor nations and future generations of what they need to survive. The average American uses over 200 gallons of water a day, whereas developing nations use around 5 gallons of water a day. And if everyone else around the world lived the way we did, just water resources only, it would take 3.5 Earths to sustain that. And so we are, what does that mean, right? We are not following the commandment, "thou shalt not kill," because we don't have the earth to sustain the way that we live.
So this word, ordinary radical, finally we took it from a gentleman named Shane Claiborne. He has a book, and I like it, what he mentions about it, radical, that root word radix, meaning to be rooted. And so, which is kind of funny and ironic because, really rootedness for humans is we eat, right, is one thing. And so, but it's funny that growing food in your yard or having chickens can somewhat be seen as a radical or crazy thing to be doing, around here, when really it's an essential thing to life. On the far right, we have a picture of our compost program. We needed compost to grow our food. And so we just decided, hey, let's go around and knock on doors, talk to our neighbors and say, hey, can we collect your food scraps? And now we have about 20 neighbors that are composting with us, and we go around on bicycle and pick it up. So it's pretty simple, and even other neighbors have learned about composting. We know volunteers have come through and learned about composting, and that's our waste, just learning how to handle our own waste in a good way. And some people think, well, what's wrong with throwing food in the trash can? It's going to break down anyways. But really, when you look at it, it's going to a landfill. And the way that those landfills are, an apple or a banana could even last, dozens of years in the ground. And it releases methane into the atmosphere in the way that it's breaking down in an anaerobic process. So by composting, not only you're getting the fertilizer to use, but you're preventing the methane release that would otherwise happen. Oh, I hit something. Great.
I just clicked it for you.
No, that's good, yeah. And then all these things, I got pictures of community here, because a lot of these things that we're doing, it's pretty overwhelming as an individual. It's overwhelming as a community to think about like your daily habits and how am I going to change those. And so in community, things become easier. In community, Jesse can focus on the food and I can focus on something else, and we can all figure out the systems that we put in place in our household and how we want to live, and it becomes easier. And so we talk about this, though, this changing ourselves, changing our communities, and changing the world. there is a lot of things we can do as individuals, and we just kind of skim the surface, and we want to have lots of time for questions. But I also want to remind you that collectively, we need to organize and take action too. Like Jesse and I couldn't ride the bus here this morning because it would have taken, we would have left at 5:45 to get here on time by 8 o'clock from our place to here, taking public transportation. That shouldn't happen. We should be able to hop on public transportation and get here in a decent amount of time. So there's some things like that no matter how much we desire to use public transportation, we just can't do that because society, we haven't set that as a priority. And then also thinking about like, well, the US military, I was looking up the numbers, have just as much of a carbon footprint as 140 nations, the US military does. And so that's where all the burden doesn't fall on the individual. So sometimes when we talk about these things, people get really stressed out. It's like, no, we're not saying this to stress people out. And we can make an individual change, but there are societal changes we need to advocate for and that we need to think about as a community and what our priorities are. And so I just wanted to mention those things as well. And these different changes, we like to think of them as experiments. So maybe you tried, you experiment with composting, or you experiment with shopping differently, or sharing with neighbors, or whatever it may be. And then you just try it out. And I find that to be less stressful, thinking in that mindset as well.
Why we don't, because how the students, you ask them on the right.
Oh, yeah. So Jess is bringing up, we do this awareness walk at the beginning of every week with the volunteers when they come in, and we talk about Catholic social teaching. And after Care for Creation, I always ask that question, well, why don't you compost? Or why don't people ride their bikes to work? Or why don't people recycle or do these different things? And the answers are always the same, week after week after week. It's, well, I don't know about it. I don't know how to. It's too much time or energy or money, or I don't think it will make a difference, or it doesn't matter. And what I find interesting about that is it's good to name those reasons, to think about that, because I find that those are the same reasons we don't do a lot of things. We're talking about caring for the homeless. We're talking about finding better solutions to deal with prostitution and sex trafficking or immigration. And why don't people take these more compassionate routes? Is usually they don't know about it. They don't know how. Maybe it's a lot more time or energy or resources. So it's no different when we're approaching our lifestyle changes and daily habits for the climate. So that's it. We're going to take a break and do questions. And
hello, Sheilas. Thank you for speaking with us today. I'm very happy to be here. I was wondering if you guys would share some books or films that you might recommend us to consume sustainably about anything that's been important to you, religious or non-religious. Thank you.
I have to think about the different documentaries. You mentioned one.
Oh,
I'm bad at remembering names, but we did talk that we will pass on resources to maybe Barb after this that can go out in a follow-up email of things around the city, and we could add in documentaries and books too in there.
Yeah, after we think of these things on the fly. Well, definitely they'll send those to us and we'll email it to all of the attendees, but also put it on our website for our general population to share, because it's invaluable to have all this information. We have other questions?
Yes, I remember being at Nazareth Farm, and I'm wondering about your Jerusalem farm. How big is it? Where is it? What does it produce? And how many people come to help? A little more, information in that way.
Yeah, we're located in Pendleton Heights neighborhood, which is off Independence Avenue and the Paseo, basically in the northeast, historic northeast neighborhoods. We're actually on Garfield Avenue. There used to be the old Don Bosco Center, had a center there. But in our community, there's 17 of us that all live together between two houses. And it's our family. There's another family with kids. And throughout the year, we invite what we call sojourners. So Jack actually was a sojourner with us for a while. People, those are people that might stay with us for 1 month up to 6 months. And then our community members, we make a year commitment and stay there long term. Some of our community members have been around 7 years. And we bring in volunteers throughout the year. So we host about 12 group weeks, mainly in the summer, but then also spring and fall breaks. We bring in high school and college students that spend a week with us. And our lot, we garden in probably 3 different locations. So there's a community garden that the whole neighborhood gardens in, and we help manage that and just do the general maintenance like mowing and stuff like that. But then also we have like 20 raised beds there. And then we also have on our property, our whole backyard, we grow food there. And then we have an orchard. There's some neighboring apartments that have an empty lot, and the owners of the apartment buildings asked if we can start an orchard there. So we have like 24 fruit trees, strawberries, lots of berries. So we grow peaches, apples, figs, strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, and then we grow a lot of tomatoes. So when we're growing our food, we think about what do we consume the most. And so like we go through a lot of tomatoes just throughout the year and all different things. And so we just try to grow a lot of tomatoes and then we can it. And we'll make sauces, we'll make paste that Jessie will freeze in ice trays. She'll make like a tomato paste and put it in ice trays and freeze that. So we're always trying to find ways to preserve food. And yeah, anything you want to, did that answer your question? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, when people hear farm, sometimes they think a much larger scale.
We say we're a
glorified garden. Oh, nope, sorry, shoot the.
Barb's in charge.
We have groups that visit. Part of what the experience, at least that I've had, was that there's a process by which you begin to go into the experience.
Mhm.
And there's also a way in which you help people reflect that they can then use in their life. What are some of those tools of reflection that you found most helpful to help folks like me begin to get it?
So the question is, for those who couldn't hear it, is about what are some of the tools for reflection that we use, especially with volunteers and other groups that come being immersed in the lifestyle.
Yeah, when volunteers come, kind of on this presentation, what we talked about was our cornerstones. And when people come, the best way to dive into it is just to tour the farm, because we use a lot of different signage and in fun ways, decorative ways. And through example, we show kind of our processes of how we live. And so I think for a lot of the volunteers, going through the week, Jessie mentioned like bucket showers, for instance. So we'll share some facts. So the first thing is being educated. We might share a fact of like, 2.5 gallons per minute comes out of your shower head. And volunteers are like, whoa, like I take a long shower. And so they start realizing like, that's a lot of water. And then through the week, the experiment for them or the fast is to take a bucket shower. So then they see that, oh, really, like, what am I doing here? I'm cleaning myself. It only takes 5 gallons of water, not even that, to do that process. But I'm using like 40 gallons of water in my normal shower. So hopefully, then we begin processing. So what can you do? You can set a timer to take a shorter shower. You can do a bucket shower if that really helps you. But it's just kind of bringing that awareness. So we do that with so many different little things in our day-to-day where we're first presenting some facts. So researching, watching documentaries, reading books, news articles, researching, learning about this. and then trying to do little experiments and continue on.
And I think also at the end of the week, we like to have conversations with people just about their week and having that time of what surprised you and letting people think back on their own experience. I think asking questions about, that what surprised you. And one of our reflections that we do is, where did you see God this week? And that doesn't seem like a reflection. And most people, share like, oh, I saw God in the people I worked with or whatever. But yeah, just giving that space and time for people to have that reflection. And yet I don't want to say like a loaded question, but like a reflective question for people to really dive into. Well, what do you think you could take home with you? Because that's the other thing about the farm experience is it's a retreat. We all come home high from a retreat. Like that's how it's supposed to feel, right? But then having students really reflect on like, well, what are some of the things that we did here that aren't separate from your life at home? Like when I get back to the real world, I'm gonna do this. And separating the idea that we don't live in the real world, we do live in the real world, and that everyone can make small changes.
I believe we have a question in the chat room right now.
The question is there anywhere in KC where I can take unrecyclable clothing? I've heard those can be sold to companies that can recycle them.
I don't, but if you go to recyclespot.org, that's sort of a really great resource to find where you can recycle anything. You can just type anything into the box and it'll give you options. Bridging the Gap is a really wonderful resource that we have here in Kansas City. You can call them about just about anything as well.
I typically wear my clothes until they can no longer be worn, and then we cut them up into rags and use them around the house.
Yeah.
So a lot of my clothes end up, cleaning the house or cleaning up work sites.
My mom jokes when they visit, it's like a whole litany of what happens to a rag or like a shirt. First it becomes used in the kitchen, and then it's used to clean like bathrooms, and then it's put down in the home repair, and then it goes to the vehicles where it just totally gets ruined. It's like the whole process of the life cycle of a rag.
Yeah.
But then, we don't buy any paper products. So
I just wondered, is there a way for adults to come and volunteer or to spend some time learning what you do? And
Yeah.
also, I know that worms recycle clothes. Worm
Worms.
composting. My
Yeah.
sister did it.
oh yeah,
Where she lived.
vermicomposting.
Yeah, they just have a worm farm out in the back there, outside their kitchen, but you can actually, put fabric in there and they'll
Eat it.
decompose it.
I think Jesse's grandma for a while had worms in her bathtub that she composted
Everything.
in her bathtub. But yeah, adults are more than welcome. We encourage it to come and volunteer. So we work Tuesdays through Saturdays. And the reason we do that is we know that people work often Monday through Friday. So Saturdays are often times that people can come. And the work that we do it's so broad. So people can come if they want to help out at work sites and do construction, but also people can come help us process our basil or help us can tomatoes or weed in the gardens or plant, or we have honeybees that we work with. So there's a broad range of things that, usually if you contact us, so if you were to email volunteer@jerusalemfarm.org, so volunteer@jerusalemfarm.org. If you emailed that and told us what days and times you were interested in joining us, and maybe what you're interested in, we can work with you. Also, if you just want to come and have a tour, you can come and arrange that, and you can just check out our place. And then once a month, every second Tuesday of the month, we have a community dinner at 5:30. And all are welcome to come and join for that community dinner. And you can see the place and share a meal with neighbors and us. And so that's a good time too.
Just to follow up, Jordan and Jesse, because I want to give you this opportunity because I was thinking of it.
Because for years, we've been hoping for and praying for perhaps like a summertime house manager.
Oh.
And so maybe you say, because maybe somebody's out there in the virtual world or here in this room that might want to give a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks in the summertime to come and live at the farm and help take care of our group. So I'm going to give you a chance to say a little bit about that.
Sure. So like Jordan said, our sort of what Dave is saying is our Sojourner program is for people to come for 1 to 6 months. And that is not just young people, that is people of any age. Come for 1 to 6 months and work with us. And one hope that we always have is for a house manager, someone who enjoys being in the kitchen and sharing the skills that they have with young people. So.
Yeah, to that point, our gardens, processing food is one of the biggest things that we do is preserving. Every Friday, we go to local grocery stores. So one thing to think about is like 40% of food in the US is wasted. 40% of food that's grown ends up in the landfill or whatever. And so one example of this is every Friday, we go to 2 different grocery stores, Cosentino's downtown and Sunfresh
On Mill Street.
on Mill Street. And we get all the food that they're throwing away that day. And it is just boxes and boxes of food. And so we take that and there's a local coffee shop we bring it to and they distribute it to folks. But then also we keep some of it for ourselves to consume. Some of it we have to preserve right away because it's going bad. Other stuff we consume that week. And then other stuff we just compost it. But to that point, the house manager is kind of getting creative, using what we have because we're getting this abundance of food. So we don't want to go buy other stuff. But then sometimes when you're planning a meal, you know, it's kind of switching your mindset of rather than like, let me find a recipe of what I want to eat and then go buy all that food. We're thinking, oh, this is all the food that we have. What can we make with it? So one joke was like, oh, well, what are we having for sweet potato tonight? Because we just have so many sweet potatoes, so it's no longer dinner. It's just we're having sweet potatoes and how are we going to cook it? So
We're very good at growing sweet potatoes.
so, and then when we're cooking for volunteers, particularly in the summer months, we could use extra help. So that's what Dave was helping us promote that.
And
So-
we also, in addition to that, we have people who come once a week. So we have a couple of volunteers who join us every Friday or every Wednesday.
Mm.
That's another option of volunteering.
Or in our chat room?
Chat question.
Oh, I see a gentleman
Oh,
next to
they
you.
just added it.
Oh.
So one thing I would encourage people to do is go to their community night. And if they have a group of high school or college students that are on retreat, it's a interesting experience because you see how they're constantly helping the students to integrate what they're experiencing. And right during when the pandemic started, I brought some students from Washington University in St. Louis, and that guy behind me brought some from Avila. And if you want to see David in an alternate personality come out, I mean, it's hysterical, but they have them replay the day in some kind of a interactive way, whether it's a song or a poem or whatever. You'll see Dave talk through a whisk or a spatula. So it is a delight.
We like to have fun. I was listening to an NPR radio interview one day, and it was a gentleman, I forget his name. He was talking about growing up in a Jewish family. And one of the things that resonated with me was he said this thing about like, well, you know, in Judaism, there's all these laws or things that they had to follow. And he said that his family was really good at, as opposed to like, oh, well, we have to do this. It was more of like, we get to do these traditions, right? And so I try to think about that with all that we do, is we're not doing this because we feel we're obligated to do so, but how are we having fun with it? And how are we creating these unique experiences while also doing things good? And that's the only way that I find you'll be able to sustain these practices if you're not doing that
Yeah, when the when we have community night and there's 60 or 70 people, and then instead of using paper plates, we obviously use actual plates, and then it's like, all right, time to do the dishes. But it always ends up that the groups, are in there singing, and that's one of their highlights of the week was when they did dishes as a group, because sharing life together and creating that joy around the things we do.
I've been to the farm and heard multiple groups say, this has been life-changing for me. And I was just wondering, do you know how many groups you have had come through? How many individuals? Have you calculated that through the 10 years?
We bring in about 300 a year.
On a huge year, but
Okay,
yeah,
200
that would be like 2018 and 2019.
before pre-pandemic numbers.
Yeah,
We're ramping back up to those,
Yeah.
hopefully. But
yeah, and that would include day volunteers and week-long volunteers. Yeah.
I just want to emphasize how many lives you have touched.
thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, and what's interesting about, just a little plug, so we were inspired to start Jerusalem Farm from our experience at Nazareth Farm. There's also a Bethlehem Farm that was started from folks that lived at Nazareth Farm. There's a Emmaus Farm in Kentucky that is inspired off the same things. And then the Diocese of Joliet just started this Laudato Si Ministries, and they're starting a Jordan River Farm from a lady that lived at Nazareth Farm and has had this experience. So I guess to your point that, when people come together in community and are serving in a higher way, I guess you're realizing that your life has a greater purpose and when we're doing some of these things. And it's inspiring to see that people are making these changes and starting these new communities around the country.
Where in the Joliet diocese have they started? I just moved from that diocese.
Oh, great. So yeah, Kayla Jacobs is the lady that is the director of Laudato Si Ministries in their diocese. It's just within the last year that they got some property, and I'm not familiar with that area, so I don't know exactly where it is. But if you looked up Laudato Si Ministries or Kayla Jacobs in the diocese, then you can.
Joliet is just west of Chicago.
Yeah, I think it's south of Joliet. Yeah.
Yeah. I lived in the western suburbs.
Okay. Yeah, or if you Googled Jordan River Farm, you would probably find it.
So I think it would be great to hear your story of your process of awakening. You haven't always been like this, Jordan especially, and Jesse growing up in an evangelical family. So I'd like you to tell a little bit of that story, because I think it's a good story.
Yeah, I grew up in a Catholic family, and I think many of us in our high school years, I guess I'll speak for myself. I went to a Jesuit high school. I'm hearing these things. I'm going to church on Sundays with my family, but there were those years where I'm really questioning, some of my faith and what is it, faith from my parents to my own. And, and some of those pivotal experiences that I had were just encountering people that were in the streets, or, on a lunch break, I might be eating at a park and hearing stories from people going on service trips. But one thing that stood out, there's one moment that really stood out to me was I was with my mom. It was an Ash Wednesday. I was like 18 years old. I had long hair. I was wearing like a sweatshirt, kind of pants that had holes in them. And she took me out to brunch that morning. She worked downtown, and it was kind of a nicer place. And I'm sitting outside in the patio while she went inside to order some food. And a lady came up to me and says, "Excuse me, you're not wanted, or you're not welcome here. You can't be here." And I was really confused, like, what is going on here? I've never had anyone say that to me before. And she said it again. And my mom at that point was coming up and could see something was happening. And she said, "Oh, is he with you?" And my mom said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, I'm sorry. I thought that earlier there were some young folks that were homeless begging people for food. And so she thought that I was one of them. And for me, my mom became very angry and took her to the side and yelled at her or whatever. But for me, it was like, wow, like I grew up pretty privileged. I never needed or lacked anything really growing up. And so to have someone speak to me in that way based on my appearance was like, wow, this is what some people are experiencing every single day. And so that was kind of maybe an initial wake up of, how am I going to engage in this world? How am I going to put myself out there? And I never want to make anyone feel that way, definitely. And it kind of led to this journey of volunteering. I didn't go to college. I joined an AmeriCorps program, met Jess. We hitchhiked around the country a bit, which for me was kind of like the Jesuits sometimes do this pilgrimage where they don't have much money and they have a pilgrimage. Yeah. And that's for us, hitchhiking was that we had so many generous people that would come and pick us up and give us rides and share their stories. And oftentimes is actually even people that were saying like, well, I used to be in your shoes. I had to walk and, or it was just people that can relate. We're not too afraid to kind of go out on a limb to help someone. So that was kind of a pivotal moment for us as well. And
Yeah, I think also when I met Jordan, we were, like he said, we were in AmeriCorps, and one thing you forgot to mention is that the woman had ashes on her head when she was saying that to you. And I think in some ways that turned you, in other things too, turned you away from the church in some ways. And when I met Jordan, he was really into Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi and all these things. And he would, say these quotes, and I would be like, well, yeah, but I mean, Jesus said that too. And here's how I was raised evangelical, so I was going to get those Bible quotes out there like you don't even know. And so, I was always saying, well, like Jesus was just as radical and that sort of idea. And I think together, we, kind of built on the ideas that Jordan had and my very rootedness in the Bible, but I didn't have the connection with justice. I don't think, certainly the church I grew up in, that was not a cornerstone of our church in any way. It was the connection that Christ not only did charity, but his work included justice, and how those two work together to make change in the world. And so it wasn't until I met Jordan and went to Nazareth Farm and lived there that I learned how interconnected those two things are. Being raised always, I wasn't raised in exactly the same privileged way, but certainly had a lot of privilege, and our family's value was giving of our time, because time is worth so much more than money, and volunteering, but never understanding the justice component of that. And so really learning about that through Catholic social teaching and Nazareth Farm.
Yeah, and we were attracted to Nazareth Farm where a lot of our formation happened because, Jessie grew up with her mom as a great seamstress. And so for like our wedding, she made her wedding dress and our clothes. But the essentials in life, clothing, food, shelter, those are kind of the things that we address and we're really passionate about. So growing food, learning about that, repairing homes, working with our hands, our clothing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another question.
No.
No.
All right, great. No. No. Oh, no.
No.
Great.
Oh, we were coming to another question. I feel like I can't see as well with my mask on. That doesn't make sense.
I have kind of a different question. Your kids are school age, some, at least the oldest. Do you send them to the public school or do you homeschool the kids?
Good question. Our kids go to the public school, so they go to a foreign language academy. And yeah, we talked a lot about that. Just there's different ideas, right? Of do we want to support the public schools? Do we send them to our neighborhood school? Do we send them to a Catholic school? Do we homeschool them and, you know, educate them in the ways that we want to? I think for us personally, the opportunity for them, Foreign Language Academy is an immersive Spanish learning school. And so from kindergarten upwards, they're taught primarily in Spanish. And so for us, them learning that language was important. And a lot of people that live around us in our neighborhood speak Spanish. And so that's kind of how we chose that.
I was just curious, in addition to grants, do you like sell any of your produce or do anything to generate to be economically self-sufficient, and how does that work?
The question is about funding and using the garden as a source of funding, which we really don't do, mostly because we eat everything, because we host, like we said, there'll be 200 students that come through the farm in the summer. So we usually eat pretty much everything that we grow. And, but we do have some things that we do sell. So like currently we have, we harvested all of our elderberries, and we have elderberry syrup that we made for boosting immunity and helping you get through a cold faster. So there's some specialty things like that that we do sell, but it's not a large source of income for the farm. Yeah.
All of our gardens are also open to the public. So we have neighbors that harvest, or we share most of our food with everyone.
Hello again, Sheely's. My second question is about the future of the farm. So congratulations on 10 years. What do the next 10 years look like?
We didn't answer your last question, so I think we'll also just skip this one.
No, that's a good question. You know, the farm was built on a big dream by Dave, and you know, through the Holy Spirit and lots of work and lots of people that have come together, we've come pretty far in 10 years. So for us, there's a constant process of just listening to the community in which we serve. Last year and this year, we're working with a funder to do more surveying, actually, where we're facilitating that listening process, but not just in the typical survey fashion to fill this out. We've been coordinating community gatherings and listening sessions with various groups that we interact with, particularly focusing on, in the Northeast, there's a number of refugee and immigrant communities. It's so diverse. And so we're pulling together, actually later today, a Korean community from, was it Myanmar, to listen to them and what their experience is in the Northeast. So from those listening sessions, you know, I'm sure that will impact how we serve things like our tool library, our compost program, the code violation work. All that work stemmed from listening to the needs that the community had and kind of expanding upon that. And then right now we're doing a visioning process with all of the volunteers and supporters and people that have been through the farm. We have some ideas that needs we've identified and things we're passionate about. Some of them are around sustainability with our vehicles, and you know, oftentimes, for instance, things like solar panels. Our houses are powered by solar panels, and we're fortunate we don't have an energy bill because of that. We produce, actually, in one of our houses, we produce 3 times as much electricity than what we actually use, because the house that the sisters helped us build is so energy efficient that when we put those panels on, we just overproduce. But technologies like that are often unavailable and unaffordable to folks that are lower income. And you know, sometimes they would be the ones that would benefit the most too, eliminating an electric bill. So we have some ideas like that on there. But really right now, we're kind of in a listening and discernment phase on where we want to focus our priorities and our resources. Because everything we do, we want to do really well and make sure that we can sustain it into the future. So.
So with that many people going through every month or every year, how do you do like mass and church and the sacraments and things like that? Do you have a priest that comes to in an area that you have dedicated to that sort of ministry, or do you guys go to a local parish, or how do you manage that?
So on Sundays, we go to our local parish. But during the week, when we have a volunteer group in, we do have a priest come out twice a week. And we're lucky enough to be very close with, is he the chaplain here? Is that what it is? Father Keith Branson. So he's been with us since the beginning, coming out to the farm twice a week. And we're also lucky enough to live in an old convent, so it had a chapel built onto it already. So it came with the territory. So we have a chapel space that Father Keith comes and offers masses twice a week.
And then our community, we start our work day, we gather for prayer at 8:30 every morning. And then after that, we begin our work for the day. But
Do we have any other comments or questions? We have a few more minutes before we wrap up. I see Sister Ruth.
You mentioned that you had 17 in your community. Could you share with us how you, I don't think they all came at the same time. So how do you incorporate and keep growing without tension or whatever?
yeah, this is our largest community we've had since we've started. And we're split between two houses that we share. It's our family, and that's counting the kids. We have 3 kids, and then there's another family that has 2 kids. And so our families are in different houses, and then we have other individuals that fill the houses as well. And, you know, people hear about us from all different ways. A lot of our community members started as sojourners. They might have spent a month with us, and then they realize that, you know, this is what I want to continue doing. And some come right out of college. Maybe they spent a week with us on a retreat.
Or went to a school that came on a retreat, and then when they were talking to their school counselor, to the campus minister, like, oh, I don't really know what I'm going to do next. The campus minister was like, why don't you go to Jerusalem Farm for a year and figure it out? So there is some of that too.
One of our community members, he was a teacher and had taken many students to Nazareth Farm. But with the pandemic and some of the changes, he wanted to look into something else, and he wanted to be in a city, and so he checked into us. And so, yeah, all those different ways that people come together.
Mm-hmm. Our community also includes, we have a Precious Blood volunteer. So the Precious Blood, who Father Keith is a part of, they have a volunteer program, and they were formerly living with the priests at Rockhurst, but they couldn't anymore because of the pandemic. And so we offered them to live with us. So we have one Precious Blood volunteer as well. So he works outside of the community, not in the community. And then the other family, the husband works full-time for the farm, and the wife is a therapist and is starting her own practice in the city. So some of the people have differing roles in the community. We have one former volunteer who came from Notre Dame to Sion on a week-long trip and contacted us about being a sojourner, was a sojourner with us for a little while, and then decided she wanted to stay longer. And she's currently finishing her microbiology degree or something at UMKC as well. So we have some non-traditional community members as well.
On Avila grad right now, right?
Oh yeah, Teresa Kupplinger. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I find it interesting, the students that come, if you could explain a little bit more of how in the first place you're able to get these students, if they're high school, college, and is it locally that you sent the word out to the different schools? And also, like Sister Mary Al said that they had from WashU in St. Louis. So how do you get your students, and are they all from the Catholic schools, or do you open it up to other schools as well?
Yeah,
Sorry, can you just one more, sorry, Sister Ruth, I just
Several
wanted to say one more thing about, because you talked about us joining at different times, other volunteer programs like Jesuit Volunteer Corps or something, or even Precious Blood, they all start at the same time and are generally in a similar life experience and things like that. And I just wanted to speak to like our rights and how we kind of pulled that from the idea, actually from communities like the CSJs who have rights at different times in the community. And I really think that has helped. We've just started that in the last like 3 years, I guess. We have the right of welcome we have a right of discernment. So people, when they come to the farm or are thinking about coming to the farm, they'll come and stay with us for 1 week to a month, or sometimes even longer, to discern if they want to join our community. And because it's not just like, hey, I just met you, come live with me for a year. We like to have a little bit of discernment time. So we have a right of discernment that we do with people with some intentional questioning and that sort of thing. And then we have the right of welcome when people decide to stay. And then after, there's another right that I'm missing. And then after a year, we do a right of listening. So after each year that we've lived at the farm, we sit down together and have, it's like a prayer that we have together where I go through questions that I need to reflect on over my last year and thinking forward as well. And that's a time that that everyone just listens to where I'm at and can ask me questions about, different things. And I think that has really helped our community, have that thread through different people coming and going, because there is, especially in the summer with sojourners, there's a lot of people that come and go, but those rights I think have helped us have that that thread that runs through community. Obviously Jordan and I have been there the whole time and the 10 years and whatever, and Sunny has lived with us for 7. So I don't know, I just wanted to speak to that and that idea. And because we got the idea from you all.
We get volunteers from all over the country. So we have volunteers that come from the DC area, from San Francisco and Los Angeles. And then we have the local schools, Zion and St. Teresa's Academy in Rockhurst, Avila, Crystal Ray, St. Michael's has come, and Thomas Aquinas is coming in the springtime. So a lot of the local schools, and then we get, from Chicago, and we just spread the word. So coming from Nazareth Farm made it easier because from our time there, we had a lot of connections. And so when we started Jerusalem Farm, we kind of put the word out, hey, we're starting a new community and we're different. We're an urban experience. So a lot of schools are sending students to Nazareth Farm and to Jerusalem Farm and Bethlehem Farm, depending on how big their service program is in their schools. And then, a lot of the schools are Jesuit high schools. And I know that their campus ministers all get together, in gatherings. And so they kind of share where they're going, and the word just kind of spreads. And I've called, actually getting local schools. Now, a lot of the local schools come and it's regular, but when we first started, they were the most difficult schools to get to join us. Because I think sometimes people want to go somewhere else to serve. And the idea of spending a week in your own hometown on retreat isn't that appealing maybe. And so, but now, we're at a good place with that, where we have more local volunteers.
So is there a week that folks in this room would be invited to?
Yeah, we have we call it Family Week. It's really an adult week, and it's on our website. We have a website with all of the weeks, but I believe it's the last week in June for this upcoming summer. But also on top of that, if anyone our philosophy of hospitality is that we pretty much welcome as many people we can, whenever we can, as long as we're able to, in a sustainable way. But so if you had a group of people that want to come together, even for just a weekend or a week, you can contact us at that volunteer email, and we could arrange a week as well, or a weekend.
Yeah, that was sort of talking about getting out the word and things. That was how we got in with some of the local groups, was people from churches contacting us about, oh, can our confirmation group come for a day of volunteer and overnight, things like that. So, which almost never happened in West Virginia because we were an hour from the nearest town. So it was a sort of a change of ideas when we came here.
I think we have time for one more question or observation from our audience members, if we have one more. Anyone else? If you want to do your closing remarks, and we will go from there.
Did you have one or no?
Yes, I do.
I'm just kind of curious. This seems like such a wonderful thing to have in our community. And they were saying at the introduction, it wasn't your original intention to come here. And I'm just wondering how that was birthed. I mean, what did you fall in love with the property? Was there something in the community that attracted you? I'm just kind of curious how that came about.
Yeah, with our discernment process, we had been, as Dave mentioned, for a while, we were thinking about Detroit. It's closer to her family, and our funny joke was like, well, we don't have any money, so we'd have to buy a really cheap house to get something, started. In Detroit at the time had a lot of that, and or someone will just have to give us a house to make it happen. But there were just a lot of roadblocks, kind of not big ones, but just small things in the plans for Detroit. And so when Dave called, and I believe his first comment to me on the phone, maybe he'll remember it, but I remember him saying something like, hey, if I gave you a house in Kansas City, would you want to start a new community? And I was like, oh, that's like the thing that we thought would never, ever be told to me. Like, that's crazy. And so, but yeah, when we came out here and meeting Sister Rose and meeting Dave and Jude and Bill Cordero, some people that he had pulled together. And that weekend, actually, before we came, it was around Halloween. Yeah, this time, I guess. And there were a number of intentional communities at the time, some no longer around, but like Holy Family House, the Catholic Worker Cherith Brook. There were other different intentional communities, Christian intentional communities. And so we reached out to Holy Family House because we wanted to meet the Catholic worker and kind of get their thoughts on Kansas City. And they said, well, you know what, that weekend you're going to be here, we're having this big community gathering where all these different communities were gathering together for like a yearly update and a celebration. And so they invited us to join that. And so it was just a great experience. I mean, being able to see so many people that were doing similar things to what we were considering. And one of the communities, Clark from the Simple House, he drove us around the neighborhood and kind of told us a little bit. So I think that welcome and seeing that support that Dave was giving us, that Avila would potentially give us, it just seemed like it made sense and that this is where we were being led. And so, yeah, that was.
I feel like it was slightly a harder sell for me because I was like, no, I want to move back to Michigan. I want to be near my family. We have a baby now and all of those kinds of things. And we also had friends in Detroit that we were going to start this community with, and feeling like you're letting someone down or whatever, those ideas as well. So I think I was the one that was more like, I don't know, Kansas City, I don't know. And but when we walked into what we now call the farmhouse, the old convent, I just remember walking in the door and being like, yep, this is what we're doing with the rest of our lives, which is why Dave tells that story, because it was me who was Jordan was like, what are you talking about? They're giving us a house. Like everything is set up. It's clearly what we're supposed to do. And I was like, no. But yeah, once I walked into that house, the Holy Spirit was like, here's what you're doing with the rest of your life. And it was like, a little bit sad, if I'm being honest. I didn't really want to move to Kansas City. But yeah, being here 10 years now, it's our home and it's wonderful.
I think Dave.
Thank you so much for coming. I don't know about the rest of you, but I think this is another wonderful program that we've had. Thank you for our Zoom audience. We will follow up. There, I'm trying to hide from the camera. We will follow up via email and on our website with more information on how you can participate. Also, to reiterate, most of us, this is the 155th anniversary of our 6 sisters coming to Kansas City. So look what these 6 sisters have spread. And I get the honor of working with the sisters every day. And some people go, well, there's not as many sisters. What's going to happen? Well, look at all of us. Look how everything that the sisters have taught us is spreading. So I encourage all of you, this is Care for Creation in action. So be active. We all are able to get out and about more now, thank goodness. And this is a great way to help out and spread the sisters' charism. And we all know that our world can need more love, what the sisters are talking about and working together. So thank you so much and stay tuned. We will be planning our next Linger Over Breakfast. We hopefully will have it in April, but we're a little behind the time. Also, yes, if the people who are here, we've got comments. If you can let us know what you would be interested in. People on Zoom, if you'd like to be able to put that in the chat, we would do that as well. Thank you so much for coming, and we will see you in the spring at St. Teresa's Academy for our next Linger Over Breakfast. Thank you.